This is Minda Wilson with Urgent Care. Today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Topher Wurts, who is the co-founder with his son Kirby of Autism Village. It's a very interesting project, and I know you'll all want to learn more about it. Welcome, Topher.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So not everybody knows what autism really is. So how could you sort of give us an idea of what is autism? There's a lot of different opinions.
Well, that's because there's probably a lot of different versions of folks with autism. It's a type of neurodiversity, and so some folks liken it to sort of folks that have a different operating system. And so, and it's a spectrum. So it might range from folks that are just a little quirky and maybe struggle with some social constructs and stuff, to folks that are nonverbal and struggle with the need for a variety of stimulation, or maybe have acute reactions to certain tastes or smell or clothing textures or whatever. So. And in many cases, at the deeper end of the spectrum, it might be, along with another comorbidity of some kind. So really, you met one person with autism, you've met one, and then the next one will be different. And that's maybe why everybody thinks it's a little different.
So is it a neurological disease, or I'm not quite sure I understand, or is it a biochemical disease of the brain? I'm just
the working assumption, and we have a lot of brain scans now of folks with autism that imply that it is certainly a neurodiversity. It's a different, the brains are different, and there appears to be a physiological difference in the brain. So the way a brain develops is that it develops from the stem, the sort of lizard brain, that's fight, flight, all that stuff, and then over a number of makeovers between birth and just before 30 years old, the brain develops, and during that time, the neurons sort of grow out, swim out from the center. And what we see in scans of folks with autism is that the lobes or the outer parts of the brain aren't lit up in the same consistent way of somebody that we would consider typical. And so it's a difference. It's probably a difference in brain development, although, the jury's still out and research is still ongoing to figure out exactly what's happening.
And so you mentioned it's a spectrum. So, there is, I've heard of, like, Bill Gates is famous for having Asperger's. Is that on the spectrum, or, what does the spectrum look like?
Well, Asperger's was a label that was used for folks that generally higher functioning, as I described, might be just a bit socially awkward, but are very comfortable maybe with numbers or other less personal kinds of constructs and interactions. It's not really as much in use now, and it has been co-opted to be sort of the high functioning end of the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of when you hear Asperger's, you kind of find people that are able to function more or less on their own, just a little quirky and different, maybe have specific interests and capabilities that they focus on quite intensely. One of the challenges, of course, is that folks are familiar with autism maybe from movies like Rain Man or other places where they're heralding the fact that autists have some amazing ability, and in the case of Bill Gates, right, a brilliant software guy, business guy, etc. Not while in many cases where those kinds of exceptional abilities exist, you might find autism. The converse isn't always true. So one of the things that people trip over when they meet a parent with somebody who has autism is they ask them, well, what amazing skill does your child have? And of course, most of our kids are just typical kids.
So when Kirby was 18 months old, you noticed something that made him different from other 18 months old. So what sort of started you on your journey to find out that he had autism?
Well, we were very lucky at the time. I was working for a global media company and traveling a lot. And our first son, who's only 11 months older than Kirby, was with us, and Kirby came along behind. So sort of Irish twins, sometimes they call that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, we had these two kids very close together. And I was traveling a lot globally. And so we decided that that my wife could use a second pair of hands to change two kids in diapers, all that stuff. And a young lady from New Zealand came to sort of work with us and nanny with us. And she had worked in a preschool in New Zealand that had some kids on the autism spectrum. And she went to our friends while she was here, and she said that she thought she saw these traits, and they encouraged her just to talk with us, and we did. And so we were very lucky in that she was able to identify that in the early days, in the early stages, that in our state goes through Easter seals. So they sent out an expert, and she did some research, testing, and so forth. And she said, yeah, I think he's on the autism spectrum. And we're like, how do you know? And we kind of, as many parents do, struggle with the idea that we had a different sort of a critter here with Curb. And so eventually she said, listen, when you've been doing this as long as I have, you know, you kind of just know. I know you hate that, but that's kind of how it is. And that is how it is. Nikki, who was with us, had identified some behaviors, some traits, some lack of pointing, lack of eye contact, different things. And of course, this Easter seals expert, she saw that too. And now, 18 years down the road, I would say that I can pick folks out of a group too pretty quickly. So it's after you live and know them very well, you can kind of just see the social and behavioral manifestations of the autism spectrum.
So if you're a parent who doesn't have the benefit of somebody like that, but you think your child is, you know, maybe not behaving the way, what are some of the things that they might look for to before they have their kid tested at that age?
Well, so most of the symptoms, of course, rely on folks around you. Doesn't have to be somebody like Nikki that worked for us, but a lot of times you have friends or educators in your circle that will pick it out. So be open, listen to it is what I would recommend. And then once you start to look into it, you'll find there's a number of things that are fairly common. So very young children often point at things, and from the autism spectrum don't do that as much. They won't make eye contact as much. You might notice certain acute sensory behaviors, reactions to certain touches, feels, smells, sounds. Often they get very distressed with loud sounds like a siren or a vacuum cleaner. So if you I would say that the first thing is to be open-minded. Second thing is talk to your network, seek folks out that are a little further down the road with more experience. And the third thing is just do a little research, and then you'll find some clues. And as soon as you think you might have identified it, reach out to experts like the folks at Easter Seals or whoever does early intervention in your state. They'll come out and assess the kids, and I got some very good advice when I was sort of in denial a little bit about Kirby, which was, listen, the worst case is you serve as a parent, you're afraid of a disability or a label, and a friend of ours said, listen, the worst case is you get more services than you need. You can always stop them, but if you resist, you're losing time to make a difference for your child. And I was like, okay, I get it right now.
Your experience with Kirby sort of changed your life, made you rethink what you were doing and sort of think about doing something else. And it led you to Autism Village.
Yeah, it sure did. So I was, as I mentioned, I was traveling. We live outside of Philadelphia. I was, my professional life, I was commuting to New York a lot and so forth. And so when you get a special needs diagnosis, you kind of have to rethink, because the way you sort of did things before may not work in the future as you're raising a special needs kid. And so one of the things that happened is when Kirby was going from preschool age to school age program, my wife and I attended the seminar the school district put on, and to information about what the next phase would be like in school. And we looked around this sort of big conference room, and there were lots of moms there. They had their child with autism, and so often they had another maybe neurotypical brother or sister with them. Generally, they were by themselves with the kids. You know, Jan and I had somebody to watch Kirby and Zandy, and we were there together by ourselves. And we looked around the room and thought, "Holy cow! I mean, how are these folks going to navigate all this stuff?" There were clearly a lot of moms that were stressed, and the kids were fussy, and they're getting a fire hose of information. Later, we come to learn that there's a very high divorce rate in couples who get a special needs diagnosis for autism. About half are divorced by the time the child's 5, goes up to 70% when the child's 7 or 8. Typically, the kids are being raised by single moms who have 1.5 jobs, and again a brother or sister. So at that moment, we thought, well, what could we do with our knowledge and our skills from media and technology backgrounds and so forth that would be really practically helpful for these families? There are lots of find a cause, find a cure, various educational supports, so forth, but who was really providing practical stuff? And we've been sort of Yelp or TripAdvisor users and so forth. So we said, well, what if we build a location-based app that kind of democratizes that water cooler and makes it persistent? Because every other family we met, the first question was, do you know a dentist that would be able to work with my child with autism? Or where do you get your hair cut? Or is your teacher good? Or they often elope, especially when they're young. So I have a child with autism who runs away, who elopes a lot, and I'm looking for a playground that has a fence all the way around. We thought, wait, we could apply technology to this problem. And so that's when the Autism Village Foundation was born as a nonprofit, and this global app where folks can share information about good and bad places, with each other via the app was created.
And you help both sides. So you help the parents, but you also help businesses become autism friendly.
Well, that's right, because as soon as we started that, then we started to get questions from businesses, and there are lots of groups that do that. They tend to be quite localized. Some of the national nonprofits do provide supports for businesses and places, and of course, really big organizations like the airlines and very large amusement parks, say Disney, Sesame Place, they hire consultants. But often in areas sort of like in North Carolina or different places, there's a local organization that provides some autism training, and we have one ourselves. So it's a very basic training for businesses to understand what they need to do.
And so what are some of the things that maybe takeaways that people that have autistic kids can sort of, or people that have friends that have autistic kids can do in their homes to sort of make the environment easier for their friends that do have autistic kids?
Well, lots of what I say to folks is just talk to the parents, ask the parents. A lot of times the parents are just exhausted, and folks are worried about whether or not they're really able to help. But parents will help, or even if you see strangers in public that are struggling and you think you've identified it, really the most amazing thing you can do is just ask, and then we'll tell you. And that support, whatever anybody can do, is very precious to us. And sometimes it's just a few hours, so somebody can have a nap or get out of the house to run an errand, or sometimes it's more than that. So mostly what I tell folks is go with the parents. They know they know the person the best and their needs the best, and they're often afraid to ask for help, or maybe people are afraid that they can't help. But as soon as the conversation starts, they'll find a way to help.
So how did you put the technology together? I mean, did you have a technology background? Was it something you you put together. Did you know how to build something like this when you first started?
Yeah, I came from a technology background. I was even in when I was in elementary school, was interested in amateur radio and then personal computers, and so I came from the technology side, and then I ended up in sort of the global media business. So we've been early adopters of technology, and we built software before, so we kind of knew how to go about it, and that's why we thought, well, this could be our contribution to the global community of folks that are living with folks with autism.
So it's interesting because I like your approach because, as you said, there are a lot of organizations that are devoted to a cure or, medical support, but you're trying to make life better for the parents and the kids who have autism by making their daily living more normal, more supported. So I like that approach a lot. And then how do people find out about you? What's the best way, what's the best way for people to get to know about you?
Well, we're pretty easy to find, autismvillage.com on the web. We have social sites on all the major social platforms. There's a mobile app in both the Apple iOS store and in the Google Play Store for Android devices. So it's not too hard to find, and of course we're always looking for opportunities to do more stuff all along that theme, which is exactly as you described. We're kind of our raison d'etre is the practical stuff. So
let's talk a little bit about the daily life of somebody that has a kid with autism. So for somebody outside who actually doesn't know anyone whose kid is autistic, what would we see if we walked into somebody's life that had an autistic kid?
Yeah, and there's many versions of that answer as there are people with autism, but some of the things that are pretty common are that the maybe control of routine can either be very lacking or very overbearing. So a lot of the folks on the spectrum need a very predictable and recurring routine. And so in those houses, there's a lack of flexibility or ability to change, direction very quickly. In other houses, there's a good deal of chaos. And some of that is because it's imposed. So as an example with Kirby, he is very interested in, and many of the folks on the autism spectrum get very interested sort of in trains or different things, mechanical things. And so he's interested and has never lost his interest in the Thomas tank engines. So they're always lined up and stickers on the wall with their names and different things. And we just have to kind of accept that, right? He doesn't sleep easily a lot. So that meant that in the early days, Jan and I would have to take shifts at night so that somebody was up because he is an eloper. He would climb out the window and run away and stuff. So generally what I would say that's different is that there's less control. The parents have less control. You have less control when you have kids to start with. In autism houses, the person with autism has is really driving the bus on control. And so in that case, you just got to be really flexible. It can be very stressful.
Right. You have to be very vigilant, it sounds like, in terms of, making sure your child is safe and making sure that they're not doing something that can harm themselves. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, Kirby has a very little safety awareness, and he elopes and so forth. That's not everybody's experience, but in many cases, it's a part of the, it's in the soup, so to speak.
And so it sounds like,
again, I'll go back to really talk to the family, and take the time. Don't be afraid, and take the time to really try and understand your friends, your particular family's experience and challenges.
And it sounds like you need a support system too. That this creates a support system in the community, because it sounds like it could be very lonely and isolating if you're a parent with a kid that has autism.
It is, and as an example, we have there was a dad nearby that started a scout troop for kids with autism, and so we participate in that. And in that case, there's a dad or a mom and the child with autism on sort of every event or every meeting or every camping trip. And after the kids all go to bed, there's definitely a support group component on camping trips, as an example. But likewise, you'll see that in all different ways. Online groups in many communities for special needs, special ed parents, and really, it's not just parents with kids with autism. It's just special needs parents. Somebody that has a special needs child needs a lot of support. Can be very lonely and isolating.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the app that you provide through Autism Village. By learning good places, sharing information, you're creating a support system for people who
That's right.
It's like the Moms Network. When you're a new mom, you're creating that same opportunity for people to find out, what's the best situation, where's the best place to go for pizza, as you said, where can I get my kid's haircut, where can I go to an autism friendly dentist. And there are a lot of services based on the needs of your children, I'm sure, that are that they require a specific kind of touch or hand or environment in order for them to have the service performed.
Well, that's absolutely true, and that's where we really have been able to try and help. The bringing together of the users into community is on our roadmap to have maybe discussion threads or groups, and that's the piece that I was saying, that often that exists outside of our village, which is really, as you just described, about helping to share the information around places and people and businesses and parks and schools and doctors and stuff like that. So we haven't yet built out like sort of the inter-user chat. It's on our roadmap, but everything requires a little bit of fundraising. So everything in its own time.
So speaking of fundraising, if people want to support your organization, what's the best way to reach out to you?
There's on the autismvillage.com website, there's a donate button there. And also we have a few little bits and bobs in the store that help us. So that's a great way to help us out. Frequently, if you're following us, you're on our email list, or you're on the following us on social media in April and Autism Awareness Month and stuff. We're often out there doing campaigns and things. So those are all great ways to help.
So so they can support you a couple of ways. The first way is donations. The second way is letting people know, if they have an autistic child, that there's this app there to help ease their burden of raising that child. And then the third way is to sort of reach out to you through your website, right? Through autismvillage.com.
That's right. And finally, if they're aware of local organizations that our tool could be helpful to, we love to get connected to them. So if there's a great educator or autism services organization, then often we can help them to connect with the folks in their area. So if folks know about those, we love to hear about them.
And if you're an organization that wants to become autism friendly, I understand that you provide a service to help them improve their services for autistic people.
That's right. At autism-friendly.com, we provide a basic training and some stickers, door clings, and things like that. Once you've taken the training, for anybody that would like to know a little bit more about how to best interact with the public with autism and stuff. And again, Ours is just a very basic one. There may be really great ones in local areas, so we can help connect you to them, or we encourage you to search them out.
Right, and the certificate on the door of a business like that means that if you have a child with autism, it means that they are an autism-friendly place. They will be helpful to you if you go in, and they'll understand that your child, has special needs. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And of course, it's not a perfect scenario, and that not every time, every scenario can always be accommodated by every business, but it signifies that they've taken the time to learn about it, and that they're going to do their best to make everything work out really well for the family. So,
How do the brothers get along?
in our case, they get along fine. That's another interesting piece. Like what amazing skill what savant-like skill does your autistic child have? Because you see a lot of these very inspirational stories in the media about siblings that are doing amazing things with their special needs brother or sister. In most cases, they're just sort of typical brothers and sisters, and sometimes the typical ones are just frustrated and not interested at all. The autism or any special need really can sort of grow to take all the air out of the room, and that can be frustrating to the sibling. In our case, we do all right. His brother likes him enough, and they get along. All those, mostly in sort of parallel, not really tightly interactive as you might imagine two boys that are 11 months apart. Typical boys would do.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I just think that it would be interesting because, not interesting, I think it would be, there would be a protectiveness maybe, from the outside world. And then in the house, they would probably have their own drama.
Yeah. It certainly creates a little bit of, I think his brother's frustrated at times, so there's some drama, but we do better than many.
Yeah, no, I have two kids and there's sibling drama between them. So I don't see, if one of them was autistic, I would assume the volume could go up.
Yes, it can. So where the typical one retreats, right? That happens too. And so, and then they often feel like their needs aren't met, but they often feel guilty about sort of advocating for their own needs, and you get really entirely focused on the special needs kids. So that happens, and we try to avoid it. It's an interesting parenting dilemma on how to best navigate all that.
Yeah.
And the real issue is that, as I described, here we are. We're two sort of college-educated couple with decent jobs and all that, and a lot of these kids are being raised by single moms that are, really underwater. And the majority of these kids are being raised by single moms that are underwater. So
right.
We're very conscious of how lucky we are. Typically, dad disappears, right? So I didn't sign up for this special needs kid. I'm out, right? Kind of thing. And that's a pretty common scenario. So
that's also a financial problem. It creates an additional financial problem as well, on top of everything else.
Yeah. Most special needs families are struggling with a financial burden, and certainly the single parent situation is worse than most. So that drives that mom to get that other half a job, and you're a single mom raising a special needs kid and another one maybe that's typical and working 1.5 jobs. You could just imagine the stressors, and the whole system is just navigating the system is a mountain of work, and dealing with the school district and individualized education plans, and of course the districts are now dealing with a large growth in this population, and they're very expensive. So there's this tension between providing as they're required to what's needed and balancing their budget. And, so now our overworked single mom is trying to represent herself to administrators who are trying to save money and deliver the minimum, but, and she wants the maximum. Likewise, the services, the behavioral health services provided through the social services, Social Security, welfare, etc. I mean, that process is incredibly bureaucratic and cumbersome, and so all of that is a challenge for our single mom with a special needs kid.
Right, and probably another one too, not just one. Do autistic kids do well together? Like if you have, if you have a group of them, is that a safer place for them than to be mixed in with regular kids, like if in a classroom environment or another kind of environment, or no?
Again, very, very mixed bag. And that's one of the challenges that we have with this little scout troop is, especially as you often get different mental sort of abilities at different ages. So you get a wide spread of age and sort of developmental state, and how do you program for that, and then throw in some interesting behavioral challenges in the mix. The special ed classroom is a challenging place. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it's quite tricky to make it work.
I see. That's very interesting. I never realized how complicated it is.
Yeah, it's quite a there's quite an iceberg below the surface.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, I really appreciate this. I hope I hope it'll be helpful. I'd like to talk to you again at some point to just check in and see how things are going.
Sure.
I appreciate your time.
Anytime that I can be helpful, and it's great when we just get really lots of folks just don't understand. So anytime that we can just get a broader group of people that maybe haven't interacted with the population, some more information and maybe less fear of it, then we win. So I'm always happy to do that.
Well, Topher, it's really been a great pleasure talking to you. Again, if anyone wants to reach out to his organization, it's on through the web. It's www.autismvillage.com. And if they want to reach out to you personally, can they send an email through the website? They have any questions?
Absolutely. Any of the website emails will reach me, or I'm my email there is Topher, like the second half of Christopher, Topher, at autismvillage.com.
Well, thank you very much, and good luck to you. It's a wonderful thing you're doing for people, and a wonderful service. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
This is Minda Wilson for Urgent Care.